ASU ended a magical 2024 season with a loss, but it was a magical season that ASU hasn't seen in decades.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $20 off your first purchase. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in. Happy New Year, and apologies for the delay on the show. I've still been fighting that cold, and we've had some family stuff behind the scenes. Everything is all good. No worries. We are back in full force. We got lots to talk about, lots to catch up on. If you want Peach Bowl content, please let me know in the comments. I am going to attempt to keep everything fresh, but obviously I didn't get to really address it outside of the live show. If you missed that, check it out. It is archived on YouTube. Otherwise, we're probably moving on. But again, if you want that content, let me know. As for today's show, we have got to talk about this magical season that the Sun Devils had. We got to talk about why this is just the beginning of everything and why ASU's on the map. We're going to talk about the special breakout players that are returning for next year, but let's start with how magical this year was. At an individual level, how special the 2024 season was, because it truly was just unlike anything that we've seen in a long, long time. Like, we've seen good years. The 2000s saw some really good teams. The Todd Graham era had back-to-back 10-win seasons, and we were a win away from going to the college football playoff. Like, we've seen some good years in the last 25-plus seasons. But what we had in 2024, it was unlike anything we've ever seen, and it's something that we need to cherish for a long, long time. Like, I can't believe the amount of success that ASU saw this year. And consider the expectations that were placed on the program. Look, we all know ASU was picked to finish 16th out of 16 in the Big 12. That point has been talked about so much that even on this show, we've talked about it so much that I don't want to continue feeding a fed horse here. Like, we know. But beyond that, this is a program coming off a consecutive 3-win season. This is a program that was in the middle of what was considered to be the biggest rebuild in the history of the program. In the national perspective, this is one of the biggest rebuilds in the country. I mean, the program had been destroyed by Herm Edwards and the previous regime. They were in the middle of getting through NCAA sanctions. This was an insane season that the Sun Devils had in front of them. They had everything stacked against them by themselves, let alone by the media and the rest of the world who didn't care about ASU. How many people outside of the Valley were talking about ASU football going into the year? Because not even like the Big 12 really cared about them. Our good friend Drake Toll over at Locked On Big 12 had zero expectations for ASU. He picked them to go 3-9 in his preseason projections, and I think he only had one win for them in Big 12 play. There was nobody outside of us in the Valley that talked about ASU even somewhat legitimately. What have I said a million times? I took ASU 7-5 going into the year. I said a 7-5 record going bowling. I said that was hopefully or hopelessly optimistic is the way I described myself when I said that. Nobody saw an 11-win season. The first 11-win season that the Sun Devils have had in ever. It'd been a long, long time. It was their first conference title that they had won since 1996 when they went to the Rose Bowl. In fact, this was probably the most magical season ASU has had since the Rose Bowl. It was remarkable, the season that they had. But turning these expectations or lack thereof on their head and showing everybody, the fans of Arizona State, The national media, like Desmond Howard, who thought it was a joke to be picking ASU versus K-State back in November. My goodness, does he look silly at this point in time? It's been phenomenal. And ASU has not been relevant in a long time either. Like, if we're being completely honest, ASU has not been a relevant program since that 2-year stretch under Todd Graham where they had consecutive 10-win seasons, when they went to a Pac-12 championship game and lost to Stanford, when they had a legitimate shot to go to the college football playoff in the first year of the playoff's inception. That was the last time ASU was relevant. And that was only a 2-year span. Like, it's been a minute since ASU was on a national level of, hey, we got to talk about this team. And I mean, for what it's worth, take it with a grain of salt. Game day hasn't been here since, I think it was like 2006, maybe even before that, because I want to say Leinart was still on that team for USC. Like, it had been a minute since ESPN Game Day has been here, and since anyone really talked about ASU football in general, in any legitimate aspect. So for this year to end up going the way it did, unprecedented. No one saw this coming. Locked On Sun Devils sure didn't see this coming. I would tell you everybody else in the media too. I would tell you 24/7 and Devil's Digest and Arizona, AZ Central, excuse me. Everybody that is in here. The Cronkite kids, nobody saw this coming. Diehard ASU fans didn't see this coming. Like, they may have seen a way better season than I did of 7-5. No one saw a college football playoff appearance. Nobody saw us not only going to the playoff, but to be pushing Texas to a double overtime thriller of a game, and an all-time college football game, not just a college football playoff game, just one of the all-time games that we're gonna look back on this game in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years and be like, yeah, that was one of the best games of the 2020s, one of the best games that we've seen in the college football playoff format. That was the best game of the first ever year of the 12-team format. It was special. But a team that hasn't been relevant in years goes to a brand new conference in the middle of a rebuild, in the middle of NCAA sanctions, second year of a young, unproven head coach with brand new pieces across the board because they had to attack the transfer portal so much. It was brand new. They had a new quarterback. They had new wide receivers. It was a new look offensive line. Some of the defensive players were back, but a lot of it was new. And they were on the table. They go 10-2 in the regular season. They go to the Big 12 championship game, and they beat down Iowa State. It wasn't even a game. 11-win season. Big 12 champions. Their first year in the Big 12 and their first conference championship in forever. In fact, it was their first win in a conference championship game in the history of that program, because previously they had just finished first place in the regular season for the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 back then, and for the WAC way back in the 70s. Like, they had never won an actual conference championship game. They did that in their first year in the Big 12. They go to the college football playoff. They get a bye week. They are hosting, quote unquote, the Peach Bowl, and they take a Texas team that is in position to win a national championship, although quite the path they've got to go through. Got to beat Ohio State, and then the winner of either Penn State or Notre Dame. That's not an easy path. Those are 4 really good football teams. Most of them I was very, very wrong about, like Penn State. My apologies. I was not familiar with your game, Penn State. Y'all are playing some great football. But you took that Texas team. It's got a chance to win it all to double overtime. You shocked the world. Everyone was like, really? Arizona State? That's the team? The team that barely made the playoff? The team no one wanted to talk about? They are giving Texas a run for their money? And it was like, yeah, might have to watch some more ASU football. Special season. Outperforming expectations. Whether you had any or not, ASU was just so good this year. And it led to just one of the most magical seasons that the program has ever had. It was a ride. It was fun. You were the Cinderella team this year. You had most of the nation was rooting for you against Texas. Most of the nation was invested in Arizona State to be the Cinderella team and win the whole thing. Because, yeah, you've got Penn State and Oregon and Notre Dame and Ohio State and Texas and Clemson and all your who's who of programs that are in the playoff. Like, we all know who they are. There's a lot of blue bloods in there. There's a lot of national championships. Georgia was in there, obviously, but ASU was that one outlier. Them and BYU, or not BYU, excuse me, Boise State and SMU a little bit. Everyone was like, okay, I want to root for them. I want to see them make that run. And ASU gave them a reason to believe. It was wonderful. And they have a chance to run it back. Because, my goodness, a lot of that team is coming back. A lot of key players and a lot of breakout stars are returning for the Sun Devils. We're going to talk about them more in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let me talk to you about our friends over at Game Time. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that I can speak on myself that brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of previous playoff games when I was watching them on TV, and I can't wait to make new memories with the updated format and the extra teams involved. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets for events even easier than before, filtering out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, and you won't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I had Game Time Picks that I was using to get myself a deal for ASU basketball not that long ago. And as I was browsing through everything, it was a breeze. I got the check for all the seats that I was interested in. There were super deals that stood out. And, one of the best parts about Game Time is if you find tickets in the same section and row for less on another ticketing app, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference. But I couldn't find anything because they had the best cost for me. They also have an option that shows me the total cost. There's no surprise fees at checkout this way. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee that I just told you about gives me the best complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks to all of you for tuning in to make Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day, and a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Let's talk about some returning Sun Devils. And there's a lot. ASU officially has over 50 players that are returning from this year's roster. 17 of 22, or oh my goodness, let's try again. 17 of 22 projected starters or starters from this year's team are back, including 3 superstars for this team. And these 3 returning is what's going to keep ASU on the map. It's what's going to keep ASU in contention next year. So this isn't a Cinderella team. This turns into a program that is going to repeat their success next year. And it's a program that is going to go into the offseason with hype, with eyes on them. Because you're not going to have people that look at this program and they go, oh, yeah, well, look, they lost a million pieces. Like, you did lose Cam Scadaboo. That's massive. Replacing Cam Scadaboo, I don't know how you do it. They've got a good backfield with a lot of depth to be able to help you out. We'll have to talk about that depth some other time when we continue this offseason looking at Cam Scadaboo. So if you haven't hit subscribe on the channel yet, now's the time to hit subscribe so you stay up to date with that future content. But I have 3 major emerging stars that are returning for the Sun Devils next year. And it's going to keep them in that contention. So again, when you're seeing the pundits and the sports shows and the talking heads that are talking about ASU this offseason, they can't just be like, oh, well, they lost Cam Scadaboo, they lost X, Y, and Z, and this coach is gone, and they're not going to be able to run it back. Instead, you're going to see them go, a lot of that team's back. And after the success they had this year, I don't see why they can't do it again next year. It starts with these 3 players. Number 1, Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt. It's the quarterback. Last I checked, quarterback is the most important position in football. It's one of the most important positions in sports. It's up there with your star point guard. It's up there with your ace pitcher, with your elite third baseman for the hot corner. It's just one of your big man that you have underneath the rim. I'm not sure what the most important player is on hockey, but it'd be up there. Quarterback. You have a quarterback, and you're going to compete. You don't. You better hope the rest of your team is stacked from top to bottom. But ASU's got their quarterback in Sam Leavitt. This is a maybe overreaction. Maybe I'm just giving you analysis. This is a future first-round pick. The development we saw over the course of the season from Sam Leavitt, from redshirt freshman to leading ASU to a college football playoff. Phenomenal. We haven't seen anything like that in the history of this program. We have seen very minimal of that in the history of college football. Of redshirt freshmen who took their team to massive success. And I'd put Leavitt a step behind these guys for sure. Definitely would. But guys who come to mind, Johnny Manziel, Jameis Winston, these youngsters that you would not expect to do what they did, and then they did. Jameis Winston won a national championship. Johnny Manziel beat Alabama, prime Alabama with Nick Saban, when defense was the dominant factor for the Crimson Tide. He beat them. Sam Leavitt was right there. Again, I put him a step below those guys, especially because they won Heismans that year. But Sam Leavitt made ASU the competitive program that those guys were able to make their programs. And he did it quick. And now he's going in next year. Redshirt sophomore. He said he's back. You've got Jordyn Tyson is back as well. Officially confirmed, by the way. I've been waiting for that official confirmation. I have been 99% positive for probably a month and a half that he was returning. We officially have his confirmation himself. He's back, though. And Sam Leavitt is already going into the year as one of your 10 Heisman favorites. I will be putting down a couple of shekels on him to win the Heisman Trophy with everything that is lined up on him. This is a future first-round quarterback if he gets better from this past season, and I don't think he's shown any signs of regressing. In fact, if you look at his game against Texas, if you look at the box score, didn't play that great. If you watched him on the field, you went, there's a lot there. And he made a lot of plays with a Texas pass rush that was living in that backfield. Played a good game. He had a couple really bad decisions, including that game-sealing interception. But he had a good game. He has a chance to be an all-time Sun Devil. We'll keep an eye out. Speaking of that receiver, though, Jordyn Tyson, he's back as well. Going to be a redshirt junior coming off an 1,100-yard season. He led the nation in receiving yards from about mid-October to the end of the year, averaging almost 100 yards a game. I want to say for the majority of the season, he was 10 targets every game. I can't find his target numbers anywhere. If you can find them, please leave a comment so I can take a look at them. But I'd be willing to bet he was averaging 10 targets a game. Him and Sam Leavitt were just totally in sync, and he balled out. One of the best seasons the Sun Devil receiver has had in years. First 1,000-yard receiver the Sun Devils have had since Brandon Ayuk did it in the freshman year of Jaden Daniels. Ayuk has gone on to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. I'm not saying Tyson's going to take that same path, but he's certainly in line to do it. He is in line to have one of the best single seasons in Sun Devil history, to build off of one of the best seasons of the last 5 to 10 years that the Sun Devils have had at the receiver spot. They've had some good receivers, Jalen Strong, N'Keal Harry, Brandon Ayuk. He could put himself in that class next year. He'll be one of the candidates for the Fred Biletnikoff Award, which is handed out to the top receiver in the nation. He's going to be in that conversation. I think he would have been in the conversation this year if he didn't get hurt at the end of the U of A game. I think he plays that Big 12 championship game and he goes off and he does end up in that top 5, maybe flirts with top 3. He probably doesn't, because I think the top 3 that they had was pretty spot on, but Tyson was going to push more than he did after getting injured against U of A. He stays healthy for a year and he's not an injury-prone guy. You got something special. And then defensively, you've got Xavion Alford. Friend of the podcast. This dude's a beast, man. Like, he comes out, He went 1,000 days. Think about how long 1,000 days is without stepping foot on the football field. He gets out there and he's an instant impact player for the Sun Devils. He ends up being an all-conference player. He ends up being the second leading tackler on the team. He got 2 interceptions. And he is the heart, soul, vocal voice of the room and everything for this team. He's not just the leader on defense. He's the guy pregame getting everyone hyped. He's screaming, he's hollering, he's yelling, he's swearing, he's jumping up and down. He's getting in your face. He's shaking those pads. He's slapping the helmets. And he's saying, we're going to go out there and we're going to win this football game. He's special, man. And I think the NFL is going to take notice of that. First of all, he's just flat out a good football player and is definitely heading in the direction of playing on Sundays. We're definitely in the right track. But now you're also taking a look at somebody who is just embracing what it means to be a leader. And having those qualities is huge for NFL teams. To see Xavion become the voice of the Sun Devils. Every single week when we would get those hype videos and we would see the guys getting excited, you always saw Xavion was the loudest guy in the room. And he backs it up on the field. He's a hitter. He finds his way to the football. He's only going to get better. Because, again, he went 1,000 days. 1,000 days. Think about how long that is without being on the football field. And look at the high level he played at. He's back. And he's only going to get better. And HU's got a lot of other studs that are coming back too. I have a handful of guys I'm looking out for. Guys that I think are primed for a breakout. I got a list of them, but Kyson Brown is someone I'm really excited about. I think there's a lot of guys on the offensive line. CJ Fight, Clayton Smith, Keyshawn Elliott, the corner duo of Javen Robinson and Keith Abney. There's sleepers out here. Raleek Brown, I think, could end up finding a big role. Malik McClain could end up finding a big role. Elijah O'Neal, someone I've been hyping up, is back for another year, potentially a starter once again off the edge. He could blow up. Jordan Crook was a linebacker who blew me away. Montana Warren, a redshirt freshman who found the field and just looks like a good football player. There's a lot of guys that are returning for this team that are primed for breakouts. And it's the reason why, it's the biggest reason why I think that ASU will be back next year. And they're certainly in the national spotlight for reasons that they absolutely deserve. That's coming up next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website and share betting lines around the team or league. Just visit FanDuel.com. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. One last time, thanks to all of you for tuning in to make Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day, and a special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. ASU is going to be in the national spotlight next year, and they deserve it. We just talked about all the reasons why. They were the Cinderella team this year, and look at everyone they're bringing back. And that's where we start this conversation. Look at everyone they're bringing back. 17 of 22 starters. You got your starting quarterback, your #1 receiver, 4 of your starting offensive linemen, your starting tight end. The only guy you're replacing on defense is Shamari Simmons, which is a huge, huge gap. Don't get me wrong. That is a massive hole to fill since he played nickel and safety for you. But you got your 2 starting corners. You got your 2 starting safeties. You got the entire starting defensive line. You've got your entire linebacker room that is back. There's veterans you're replacing, of course. You are having to fill the hole of Jeff Clark, who was one of your stud defensive tackles. Losing Caleb McCullough at linebacker is also a huge deal for the team. But ASU is just bringing back so much of their depth as well. Your tight end room is back. Your running back room is back. Your quarterback room is back. Your offensive line room is back. Your defensive line room is back. Your linebacker room is back. Everyone is back. You lost a handful of guys, for sure. Younger guys you didn't want to lose. But most of those guys weren't in your too deep depth chart. They were guys that unfortunately weren't primed to see a lot of time on the field in 2025. They were guys that you were building the future with. And it happens. They want opportunities to play now. No one can blame them. But for guys that are returning this year, for guys that are going to see the field a lot in 2025, whether as starters or as the immediate backups to those starters, they're back. That is so massive for ASU. Then not only are you returning starters, you're returning stars. Leavitt, Tyson, Alford are back. That corner duo of Robinson and Abney, that's a good duo. They're only going to get better. Your linebackers, you're bringing back 3 of your top 4 linebackers with Keyshawn Elliott, Zyrus Fiaseu, Jordan Crook. You're bringing back pretty much all your edge rushers. Prince Dorbaugh had another year of eligibility. Elijah O'Neal received another year thanks to the JUCO transfer eligibility that they added. Clayton Smith is back. A lot of your depth is back. JPD or Justin Wadley. The interior of the defensive line, Jacob Rich-Kongaika, Zach Swanson, CJ Fight. Basically, your whole defense is back. Brian Ward's back too, defense coordinator. Marcus Roy, your offense coordinator, is back, and look at everything he's got to work with. You got a Heisman favorite in Sam Leavitt. You've got a Biletnikoff Award favorite in Jordyn Tyson. His running back room is good. You're replacing Cam Scatterby. We already mentioned that. We already know how difficult that's going to be. Kyson Brown is back. Raleek Brown is back. Those 2 alone are going to give you a lot of hope. But then you've got redshirt freshman Jason Brown, who might be the future of this backfield. Alton McCaskill is returning as well. We didn't see him much this past year, but that's veteran depth for you. They also added Kanye Udo through the transfer portal, the Army superstar. We don't have time to talk about him today, but he's a big deal, and he's going to be a subject of conversation in future shows. So again, turn on notifications and subscribe wherever you're getting your shows if you haven't already, so you can get the update for that episode when we start talking about that. Your tight end room, Shimon Mateer, Jaden Fortier, Cameron Harpole, James Giggy, they're all back. It's just this team. 4 of your starting 5 offensive linemen, and the depth behind them is back. It's phenomenal. Kenny Dillingham is extended. We talked about that on a live, which is archived on YouTube and posted on all of your what are they called? Podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, all of that. That's up there as well if you missed that one. But Kenny Dillingham is back. That's probably the biggest piece. Your head coach, the one who assembled all of this, is back. And I'll tell you what, Kenny Dillingham leaves, you're losing the majority of this roster, for sure. You lose the vast majority of these guys. But he's back. Both their coordinators are back. As of right now, I think the entirety of your assistant coaches are back too. Hines Ward, Brian Carrington, Sean Aguano, Jason Mons, AJ Cooper. They're all back. You have got such a special group here. And you were the Cinderella team last year. But you might be the team of destiny in 2025. This isn't like a TCU where everything came together with Quentin Johnston, with Max Dugan, the guys on defense, that running back, Kendre Miller, I believe. When they had that team, everything just came together perfectly. But then the next year, they lost almost all of it. And they regressed. That was like the ultimate Cinderella team. It didn't work out. Auburn, what was it, 2013 was another Cinderella team with Nick Marshall at quarterback and Ricardo Lewis making insane catches. Chris Davis making historic kickoff returns. Or not kickoff returns, but missed field goal returns for a touchdown to beat Alabama. That was another Cinderella team. ASU this year, absolutely a Cinderella team. Next year, might be team of destiny. Everything's coming back for this team. ASU is going to contend very, very seriously in 2025. And now's the time to get bought in to this team. They blew away expectations this year. They're bringing back their stars. They're bringing back their coaching staff. They are going to have a lot of press, a lot of people that are paying attention to them outside of the Valley. Don't be surprised when ASU is picked to finish first in the Big 12. Don't be surprised when ASU starts the year in the top 25, hopefully no less than top 15. Don't be surprised when some of these players are mentioned for major awards. We already talked about Leavitt Heisman. We talked about how Tyson could be in there for the Bolitnikoff. I'm sure Alford will get some mention for the Jim Thorpe Award. I'm sure the offensive line will get some love for the Jim Moore Award. You're going to see some of your coaches are in line for major awards as well. There's going to be a lot of hype behind this ASU team. A lot of hype, and it's all justified. It's all warranted. It's all there. They just got to put it together. What do you guys think of this team? Are you as excited as I am? And what was your thought on the way that they blew away expectations this year? Let me know in the comments. You can also hit me up on Twitter, RichieBrats36. The podcast is there at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. You'll get that update whenever we post new content. I have a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Before we wrap up this show, when I was in Atlanta, I ran into so many people, amazing people, players, former players, and a lot of you guys who tune into the show. And I want to give everyone that I ran into a special shout out. We're going to start with my guy, Chubbs, high schooler out in Sholo, getting ready to go to ASU next year. Chubbs, thank you so much for coming up and introducing yourself. Anthony and his dad, Bruce, who I walked into on the street and told me they listen on Spotify. Thank you guys as well for tuning in all the time. I met a lot of different parents. I met Navi Bruzon's family. I met Elijah O'Neill's family, including his dad, Robert, who got to play for Washington State back in the day. I met Justin Wadley's family. I also met the players. I met Jacob Rich-Kongaika's family. I ran into Lee Fontanu's family. I ran into so many people that helped make this show as good as what it is. So from the bottom of my heart, thanks to all of you that I got to meet in Atlanta. You guys made it a special trip, and I'll never forget it. Wonderful, wonderful time. But as always, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Every single one of you, whether I met you or not. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. We got to talk about why 2024 is a sign of things to come. We got to talk about all these players that are returning for 2025, including the most important players. I got stuff to talk about for the year, season game ball, stuff that defined the year. And we got to talk about the future too. What comes next for Cam Scadaboo? What can Sam Leavitt do? And can ASU win a national title in 2025? All of that is set to come, plus basketball coverage for an ASU hoops team that you need to be watching if you haven't been watching. So hit subscribe wherever you get your shows. Turn on notifications. I will see y'all next time. And until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.